Okay, Mr. Mayor, we are live and ready when you are.
Okay. Make sure we got the right meeting. All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is a work session for Monday, March 7th. And we've got a number of topics to discuss tonight. And the first topic will be one of four. It'll be fixed expenses overview, talking about our most of our fixed expenses such as AML, JIA, utilities, internet, and health insurance. So we'll go ahead and let the city manager take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. And the topics will kind of just bleed into one another. So if there's any topic that council wants me to go back to, or if you can't hear me over the clicking, I'm so sorry to hear about that. You just let me know and I can repeat whatever it is. So I'm just going to go through it all and then feel free to pause me at any point.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we have yet another budget work session for the council. Thank you so much for making the time to be here this evening. We're just going to start off by, as the mayor said, going over some fixed expenses. So the first set of fixed expenses we're going to look at is our general liability insurance. So we get our general liability insurance for workman's comp, elected officials coverage, public facilities, you name it, just general liability through the Alaska Municipal League Joint Insurance Association. So you can see over the course of these fiscal years from FY16 to FY22, the trend has overall been an increase, a steady increase, because their markets are contingent on what's happening nationally when it comes to insurance. Had the city not entered into a 3-year agreement in FY21, so that was June of last year, the council decided we want to keep all of our properties insured. We do want to enter into a 3-year agreement, and had the council not decided that, our cost in FY22 would have been almost $102,000. So we had a few $1,000s in cost savings, but overall, this is what it costs to insure us. Legal fees, like if there's something that our insurance can cover us for, like someone slips and falls out at the dock or entering a building, this is what would cover us. So for FY22, we're at a little over $96,000. Another fixed expense at the city are utilities, and this is just for electric. So it's looking at how much has electric from HEA cost the city. We are able to get data from FY18 to FY21, so these are actuals. And so overall, the trend is very much within $110,000 to $111,000. The finance officer let me know that FY18 included 13 months worth of bills, whereas FY19 included 11. I think that was probably through a transition of Cassell to QuickBooks or something like that. But overall, it looks like our electricity, which covers the harbor, the lift stations, the water treatment plant, light poles, everything under the sun in terms of electric, cost the city a little over $110,000. So a 4-year average for that is $106,040 to power the city. Health insurance. So it's hard to provide council with a far look back into the past of what our expenses have been, because QuickBooks only has up to a certain fiscal year. Then we have Cassell, then we have QuickBooks again. But at least looking at the past 3 fiscal years, and FY20, our healthcare cost was almost $90,000. Then it dipped down to a little over $77,000, and now for FY22, we're at $55,463. So this is to ensure all of our full-time employees. Only full-time employees receive healthcare coverage at the city. And a big reason why we see such a cost savings here in FY22 is because the city was able to become a part of the Alaska Municipal Health Trust, whereas before we were just going out on our own and finding healthcare coverage. So for FY22, it was the inaugural year where all municipalities throughout the state of Alaska who wanted to participate in this program could, which is why we got such an amazing deductible and coverage amount for each full-time employee. And it's actually insurance that works here. Before, the city was using insurance from a company called Medova, and they were based out of Kansas, and it was really hard for staff to find in-network people. So that's another perk with FY22 is we were able to get insurance through Primera. And also something different that contributed to this big difference of over $20,000 in cost savings was we had 2 employees that actually had secondary coverage. And so in lieu of them opting out of the city's healthcare, we instead just said, we'll offer you a stipend, a monthly stipend that can go towards your doctor fees if you don't get on the city's insurance plan. So that saved over $10,000 in and of itself towards the city for those 2 employees to do that. Now let's take a look at the general fund, looking at wages / salaries and employee benefits. So this is just for the general fund, including administration, Moldova Police, Fire, EMS, Finance, the clerk. The majority of us come out of the general fund. And so it starts up here. You see FY22 budgeted, not amended. So council did pass a mid-year adjustment, but I just did not have the time to update those figures in here. You see FY21 budgeted, and then the last 3 fiscal years are audited. So on average, our employee benefits cost, so that's our healthcare coverage, Medicare, Social Security, unemployment tax, retirement. That's probably somewhere, if I had to take a rough average estimate, $120,000 to $130,000 just for employee benefits. And then salaries range anywhere from $210,000 to almost $301,000 over the past few fiscal years. I would look more at these audited actuals when looking at the figures, and then these are budgeted amounts where we're hoping to get the FY21 audit statement shortly, and then FY22 is our greatest amount for wages and salaries. I wanted to note that in FY21, wages and salaries would have been higher had the city not offset the salary expenses of the Moldova Police Department and the safety officer that supports fire and EMS, had we not had CARES Act funding. So CARES Act funding allowed revenue replacement. It was one of the only ways that a city could do revenue replacement by covering the salary expenses of their law enforcement and healthcare providers with the grant funds. So had we not had that, our expenses would have been higher for FY21. Okay, now here's another look at our general fund, real and personal property tax revenue. So now we're entering revenue. We just talked about some expenses. The blue here is our real property tax. The orange is personal property tax. So think watercrafts, aircraft, mobile homes, anything on wheels, personal. And then all of our developed or improved properties in the city here in blue are real. The 5-year average for real personal property tax is a little under 18,000, and then for real property tax is a little over 278,000. So these are the two big buckets out of the 3 big buckets that fund the city. Is real property tax, personal, and sales tax, which we're going to get into in just the next slide. But you can see we're pretty predictable. There's not too big of a sway. Something that's important to note is that in FY22, the assessment roll for real and personal property tax in Moldova decreased, which meant we received less revenue for personal and real property tax. And there was a moment with the council when deciding should we increase the mill rate because of that. The council elected not to, but that meant over a $10,000 loss in revenue for the city as a result of not changing the mill rate because of our assessment roll going down. Now here's looking at sales tax and charges for services. So sales tax, this is the 3rd big bucket of revenue for the city. Again, not too big of a sway, all things considered in terms of how much revenue we're pulling in. especially too when compared to charges for services or fees. So this could be anything from like fingerprinting, refuse service, like people to collect the trash, very minimal things, making copies and scans. Those are charges for services, which is shown here in yellow, and then sales tax here in gray. So again, pretty standard, not huge shifts in revenue for the city or fluctuations in the city. And then you'll see here the average in sales tax is 137,000, and for charges and services, a little over 52,000. Here's another source of revenue, but this source is not sustainable. So this is called the Community Assistance Program. It's money that the state gives to us. In the past, we've used it to pay for our police and pay for insurance. For fiscal year 22, the council made the decision, let's allocate 10,000 towards jackaloff, and then the rest of the money can go towards general liability insurance. So that $96,000 amount, the money that we got in FY22 helped pay a significant portion of that. You can see that it's been basically on the decline. So since FY 2009, we started at almost $111,000, and now we're at 73,000. So a $40-ish thousand loss in revenue over this period of time. And this is a source of revenue the city's been using to balance our budget when we've been getting the news from the state that this is something that they always consider eliminating. So very important for the city to keep reducing our reliance on this money, because there's a chance the state could say, we're not going to give it to you this year. And then what do you do with a hole in your budget when you're used to having that revenue? So a lot of numbers here on the screen. And I just wanted, if there's only one thing you get out of this, this is it, what I'm about to share. So I took our 5-year average for real property tax revenue and our 5-year average for personal property tax revenue. When you add those two numbers, they do not cover the actual expenses for the employees and their benefits in the general fund. So another way of saying that is the personal and real property tax you guys pay, that's not enough to even cover the staff in the general fund. So basically the sales tax revenue, charges for fees, the community assistance program funds, state of Alaska contracts that we sign every year so that Sylvia Police can go outside of city limits. Those are helping make up that gap. But that really struck me as a big thing to point out is the taxes people pay don't even cover our staff. So I just tried to come up with a real theoretical example here, and it does not include everything. So if you just look at our big sources of revenue, the property tax, sales tax, charges for services, and you compare them against expenses like wages and salaries, employee benefits, general liability insurance, utilities. This total expense example amount here, that doesn't factor in things like facility maintenance, vehicle maintenance, legal fees. I just wanted to take a moment to share with the council. In the past, let's see how many fiscal years this is. 7, 8. In the past 9 fiscal years, we've spent over $130,000 in legal fees just for planning related topics, zoning issues, land issues, and leases. So this is an expense that was not factored into this theoretical example, yet this expense hits our general fund. And this is something that we saw last work session. How could we, when you look at our fund balance, disregarding 2017, because for whatever reason, the fund balance was withdrawn and then put back again the next year, we've been on a decline. And you can see that our expenses are more in the $600,000 to $700,000 range, and our revenues aren't meeting that on a reliable basis. You see things change starting in FY19 or FY20, and I think that's because we got CARES Act funding, COVID funding. I want to say that was received in FY20, but I would have to confirm why the revenue is actually higher in these 2 fiscal years, but overall, we've been slowly eroding the general fund. And it's because, again, our basic taxes don't even cover the wages associated with what it takes to provide essential services in the community. But that's the expenses versus revenues part of the work session. Are there any questions on this information?
Anyone have any questions?
Okay, I'll keep going, Mayor.
Okay, sounds good.
So keeping this in mind, because these are actual expenses compared to revenue. Council knows when it comes to our permanent fund and major maintenance and repair fund, those are our only 2 reliable sources of savings. And so, the Solovia Permanent Fund as of February 28th has a little under 550,000. And then for the major maintenance and repair fund, a little over 230,000. And this is shown on page 85 in your meeting packet. But out of all of the unanticipated expenses that the city may face, these are the only sources aside from fund balance that the city could tap. And then even these have restrictions on how you can use them. So let's say the city is in a lawsuit and we need to make a significant withdrawal to offset some legal fees or a settlement. That would most likely come from fund balance unless the council elects to use our savings for like making improvements on our infrastructure as a way to pay those legal fees. Does that make sense? Like we don't have a sustainable source of savings to offset unanticipated expenses that come up, such as legal fees. Something else to bring to the council's discussion is on page 86 in your meeting packet. I asked the city clerk to do a comparison for us. What does it take to operate the multi-purpose building versus what does it take to operate the city office? And I just put the excerpt for the overall summary of her data compilation. And it costs more per square foot to operate the city office, and this does not include the warehouse that Public Works is in. That's separate. It costs $2.69 a square foot for the city office versus $2.22 here for the multi-purpose building. And so when you're comparing just the square footage alone, and you can see how it's fluctuated slightly over the past 3 fiscal years, it makes sense for the city to consider consolidation when looking at how it costs us to operate that building when we could reduce those operating expenses by trying to reconfigure this building here to support administrative staff. The only thing with that is we have to wait until we hear back from the community block development grant review process, because if council wants to consolidate and move us in this building and we receive that grant, we may not be eligible or may have to eliminate things that the grant would cover because they don't support general government services in this building. So we're going to find out in April, according to the grant application, whether or not we receive the funds. But we should, if we don't receive the funds, have this conversation in May about what it could look like to bring administration over into this building as a cost savings measure. It will be a very heavy lift, but it is something when looking at the utility comparison alone of the buildings that the city should consider as a future cost savings measure. Okay, and I think this was the last topic that was on your agenda, which was how do your priorities as the council fit into our budget? And I think it's really important to draw attention to the fact that what the council says are its priorities is how the budget is focused or directed, and how staff time is directed, and staff time is money. And so council, as its first large priority, said, improving the city's finances, looking at how to recoup lost revenue. So like people who don't pay to use areas that technically have a fee. Also improving the Soldovia Permanent Fund and how that's invested. We're on that track to do that. Your second large priority was Jackaloff maintenance and upgrades. We have a community special meeting this evening to hear what the public thinks about Jackaloff, and council allocated $10,000 towards its maintenance this year. So you guys are making progress there. Your third large priority was ARPA funding and figuring out how we can take the ARPA grants we got and put it towards major capital projects like water and sewer. And you guys just approved a request for proposals to find a grant writer for water and sewer. So that's just to give you a really quick example of how your priorities, what you told us you wanted to accomplish, how we're implementing it. March 14th, we have the land use management plan coming before the council in a work session. We're going to be talking about the value added building, and hopefully we can get to improving broadband internet capability, because that was something that the council was interested in. And then your small priorities of beautification, marketing, and advocacy for the ferry, those are ongoing. So just reminding the council that these are the priorities that you set for this year. And lastly, I'm hoping on March 14th, really hoping and making a very hard effort to get you the city's first ever capital improvement program. You can call it a plan or a program. In code, we use the word program, so I'll stick to that. And so I wanted to direct your attention to pages 5 through 84 in your meeting packet, because these were needs that were identified for water and sewer in the city back in 2003. So in 2003, the State of Alaska Village Safe Water Program hired an engineer on behalf of the city, and they went through all of our infrastructure and they said, city, you should really be thinking about these things. If you were to put your money anywhere for water and sewer, here's where it would go. It's a very extensive report. I highly suggest reading it. You'll see a few of the things that are in this report included in the capital improvement program you'll see on March 14th. And yeah, a lot of work still to be done on our essential infrastructure that we already have in the ground here in Soldovia. So those were a few of the items that I wanted to talk to the council about tonight and just get your reaction or feedback. You know, what do you think when you see that our property taxes aren't even covering staff costs? Or what do you think about the cost per square foot being in this building versus the city office? You know, what stands out to you from this information so far? Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Appreciate it. All right, yeah, we can just open it back up then to council members. If anyone wants to just chime in with thoughts on any of this, basically pretty much the state of where we're at as of now, and you know where we're headed and what we have left for the rest of the year, rest of this fiscal year. So I can go ahead and open it up. Can we go ahead and can you guys put the council chambers back on the screen? There we go. Any comments from anyone in council or online tonight?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, go ahead.
Gosh, I really don't know where to start. First of this water and sewer feasibility study. Ooh, my brain was spinning reading that whole thing. Yeah, it's pretty extensive. I mean, basically what it boils down to is that we have a broken down system that we need to replace at some point in time, hopefully sooner than later. I guess I was wondering what you think we should do first to keep it. You know, we're just going to do the maintenance and repairs as things break for now. Is that the plan? Because we really can't do anything else.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Sweat, can you be I don't understand, like, are you saying when it comes to our water and sewer, are we just waiting? So I was luckily able to speak to a vice president at CRW, which is the engineering firm that's done a lot of the work here in Moldovia over the past 10, 15 years. And in that conversation, he said that the city has done a lot of work. We've gotten a lot of grant funds to do improvements when it comes to our water. Where we really need assistance is our sewer. So hopefully with the grant writer, hopefully we get a grant writer with the RFP that we put out. We can tell them, these are the top challenges that we have with our water and sewer infrastructure. What grants do you think we should pursue in order to get funding to fix those? And then have them target those grants. So we should not wait till they break. We should be very proactive and
Right.
yeah, and leveraging ARPA funding that we receive, because you can use it for water and sewer improvement. Leveraging it so that way we can avoid significant failure of our water and sewer infrastructure, if there was to be that.
Right, and I guess what I meant, I knew we were constantly looking, you know, for grants and things like that. So we're basically focusing a little bit more on our sewer then, right now, than the water, although we're looking at everything.
Right. Okay. And I guess, Councilmember Sweat, another way to answer your question is yes. In a sense, we are waiting for things to break, because we do a lot of deferred maintenance at the city. We don't have sustainable sources of revenue to do these improvements on our own.
Right.
So we just defer and hope that by the time we get our next grant, there is a sustainable source of funding to make those improvements. But staff here, we are just putting Band-Aids or doing the work ourselves to try and reduce costs for the city, and the hope that that just keeps the system sustainable. And we have partners like ARWA, they come and help us too for very minimal membership fee. They offer their expertise, but yeah, I guess that's another way of answering your question.
And I know we have to, obviously we can't leave things broken. So I know we're, you know, doing that. I was just wondering as a whole, you know, how much longer can we go on like that? You know, so hopefully maybe with somebody helping us write for a grant, you know, it'll be a little bit not easier to get one, but we'll know more of what to write in the grant to maybe possibly do a little better than we have in the past. Just stuff like that. Yeah, and can I make one more comment?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. And I really don't know either what to say about our revenues versus our personnel expenses. Yeah, we're gonna have to figure out what to do about that.
Absolutely.
So, okay, well, thank you. That's all for me.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor,
Yep, go ahead, John.
I kind of like some of the stuff Rachel's talking about. The consolidation's kind of interesting. The electric bill really surprised me. I guess maybe it shouldn't when I know what my electric bill is across town. And I just wonder, you know, where we might be able to save a little bit on some of the electric bill with some improvements. And of course, I know you were talking about that with the funding for this building. And, you know, and I know the HEA's been in town recently doing some light work and stuff. But I just wonder where we could continue to cut those costs as well. But I would be in favor of the consolidation. We've got to start somewhere, unfortunately. And we're gonna have to figure out some savings all the way around somehow. And I don't know what to think about the tax situation. I mean, I personally don't think I can afford any more taxes than I'm already paying. So that's about all I have to say on that.
Okay, thank you, John. Jennifer, did you want to chime in?
Trying to find my mute button. Okay.
Okay.
So you had the two building comparisons. You said that the office didn't include the shop. How did
Correct.
you those separately?
So the shop has, the way that the shop is heated is through reused oil or recycled oil. So I don't know what, I forget the name of what that is.
It's a waste oil burner.
Waste oil burner. Thank you. So that's how we keep that portion of the building warm. And so the public works team, they don't necessarily need phones or internet to provide their services. A more essential utility feature for them, if they were in that building, would be heat. And so since we heat the warehouse with the sorry, I can never remember the name of that, waste oil. Thank you. That's how we're able to say that those expenses don't factor in the shop. But lights would be one for sure.
Would you have to heat it anyway for the ferry? I mean, the ferry is not going to pick all that up to heat the rest of that building. How would that factor in?
So through the mayor, council member Swick, I emailed the ferry and I'm waiting to hear back from them about what it would mean if we moved ferry staff to sell tickets and do business out of this building instead. Because when reviewing our memorandum of agreement with the state, we're not required to be in the city office building. There's no stipulation that says you have to be in that building for the ferry to provide services. It makes the most sense. But if we're looking for a consolidation and not having internet in that building and phones and instead switching over here, I wanted to make sure that that would be feasible from their perspective. And I haven't heard back from them yet.
Oh, I'm just going to say as a customer perspective, that would be awful. I'm just going to say that to get your ticket downtown and yeah, I don't think that that's a great idea. I mean, I'm not opposed to moving your offices. I feel like it wouldn't work out like we'd hope as far as money savings would go. I don't know if there's potential to rent. I know was thought of potentially renting that space or using it in a different manner. I guess there's always that option. I mean, would that be an option to rent that to some other business, even though we still have the guy's shop there?
It could be council could say that, once we're out of that building, the council could say we would like to offer this part up for lease. And I mean, I could see it being beneficial, especially if the city had the value added building occupied by a tenant, because it's not really a developed building at this point. They could possibly say, we'd like to use this portion for our initial operations, but it is very much circumstantial. Just throwing this out there, but it has been something that the council's been curious about in the past in terms of comparison. So just throwing those ideas out there.
Right. Yeah. I'm not opposed to the moving. I don't know how it would work out in the long run. And I think the ferry part of it would be not ideal.
You would almost want to see if like there's a mobile app or something that, someone could be down there on ferry days with an iPad or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everything else seems to be mobile these days.
Issues already. Yeah. Yeah. Those were my thoughts. I have a whiner.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, this is probably a really stupid idea, but is there any way you can create a small little space in the value added plant and put a little, 50-gallon tank out there and a tiny little toil and use that space for the ferry? I mean, you still need Does it have electricity in there?
There is electric in there.
Yeah,
I
okay,
think
that's what I thought.
everything's very minimal in there, but
Good.
you still
Well, all
run
you need is a light, and like Jeremiah said, maybe you could, with Wi-Fi and stuff, maybe you wouldn't even need internet per se, I don't know, it's just a thought, it just came to me all of a sudden. You wouldn't need anything, maybe 10 by 10 or even smaller than that.
definitely an idea.
I don't know. What
Mr.
about
Mayor,
What about SOS? Would they have to move in too?
Yeah, it'd be a conversation definitely to have with SOS as well.
And the one thing, excuse me, just one more thing, the one thing nobody is mentioning that I would just like everybody to remember, there is another entity in this building that's very, very, very important to the community. The library. So, take that into consideration. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Harmony, go ahead.
I think we're stuck on the ferry thing now for a minute. But what about working something out with the fuel and lube for using? It's like what, 2 to 3 days a week that the ferry is in, and the fuel and lube has all the, has a computer, it has a printer, it has internet. I don't know what that would look like, but I know that Josh is pretty easy to work with guy. I think that Dan could be I don't know. That might be a thought. Keeps the ferry tickets right there next to, without getting in the way of traffic. I mean, you wouldn't want to put them in the building at the end there where they fill up the boats, but I agree with Jen. It would be kind of hard, especially if you have people coming in with like 18 wheelers coming in for the weekend in the summertime, and then they're trying to get tickets printed or something. You don't want them getting lost. I think that's as much as I had to give for the moment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Harmony. Yeah, a number of ideas here. Obviously, we're not gonna solve it tonight, but it's definitely some things to think about on a number of fronts here. I don't think any of them are going to be quick. We're going to have to definitely think before we jump. But there's definitely merit. I know we've talked about the multi-purpose building consolidation with the city offices in the past. I think we just need to work through that. Some of the things that we're talking about here tonight. How you guys would incorporate offices over there. I'm assuming we'd have to either displace or make some changes down in either Soldovia space. I know I think there's maybe some more space downstairs available. I'm not sure how all that would work out. So and we want to make it so that it's still inviting for the public to come and see you guys. I don't want you working down in a dungeon or anything, obviously. So but yeah, there's a number of ideas here. And back to the water sewer, that report was drafted 20 years ago. So that tells us that, we had issues way back, and we've obviously done a number of things on that list. I mean, it had, water treatment in there and stuff. And obviously we've gotten our new water plant. The bulk of that is obviously the infrastructure with the lines around town, both water and sewer. The scope's pretty much the same. Unfortunately, the one thing on that report that is probably grossly under calculated nowadays. I mean, those were costs from 20 years ago, and it would not surprise me if some of that stuff's doubled in cost, which is frightening. Especially what's happened here in the last 3 years in the construction industry with the cost of goods going up for all these specialty piping and stuff like that. So yeah, those numbers will grow substantially from what's on that report for sure. So just one thing to keep in mind. All right, any other things we want to talk about here tonight on this on this one? Yep, go ahead. Harmony, is that you?
That's me. Yeah, so I'm pretty overwhelmed with this water and sewers, definitely not my area of expertise. So a lot of times I'm reading this information and I'm just like jotting down questions to go find somebody who's more informed. I was wondering, like, what is the reality of Soldovia actually qualifying for grants or some sort of, I mean, is this type of work something that we're going to have to come up with like a money match in order to even qualify for this type of monies in order to like take on a project of this scope? And how does the Hughes Smith annexation fall into this conversation?
Mayor, I can.
Yep, yeah, go ahead.
So, Councilmember Payton, that's an excellent question about the match. And as far as I know, the bipartisan infrastructure bill funding when it comes to water and sewer does have a local match requirement. Where I've seen that not be the case is with harbor grants, so that RAISE grant, because Soldovia is an area of persistent poverty and we're rural. We don't have to have a match for that. But I believe in the past we've had to have matches, which has been complicated for the city because we don't have savings, substantial enough savings to make those matches. So I asked the executive director of the Alaska Municipal League to look into that for the city, because I know we're not the only ones that don't have the resources in order to match grants. So like I've heard people say it's typically 20%. You need 20% of the grant cost as a match. There's organizations like the AIDEA, which I believe is a state-run organization where they do make loans to communities that I believe could be used as a match. So we could secure a loan to make a match requirement for a grant. I know that the Alaska Municipal League is also trying to work with the state of Alaska to get a source of funding from the state to use for communities for matching purposes, but that's not a guarantee. But yes, it is. There's a lot of information in there that's overwhelming. And for me as a manager, it was hard and it's still hard to know exactly what is remaining and what has been completed, because I don't have a clean document that said, you know, this has happened and this has happened and this has happened and here's why we're delaying this, in order to guide the city on what improvements we should be targeting first and foremost. So I feel really fortunate that I was able to talk to CRW, their Vice President Pete. I can't say his last name, but he basically told me, here's how I would recommend Soldovia target what its capital improvement priorities should be, and then use that information from him, since he's worked in Soldovia basically as our engineer for 10 to 20 years, and target those projects. You bring up annexation, which is a potential for the city, but we have all of these other outstanding issues when it comes to water and sewer. So council could say, you know, we know that we have all of these outstanding projects, but we still want the city to pursue annexation above those. But again, that would be stretching your limited resources to provide new service when the city already has existing critical needs in its water and sewer infrastructure at this time. But that's a council decision. If the council wants to not focus on what we have needed improvements on for quite some time to provide a new service, that's up to you guys.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Harmony, do you have any follow-up for that?
I think a lot more follow-ups than I could summarize for now. I think I did have one other question. Oh yeah, so are we still working on our best practices? I mean, of course we're still working on our best practices, but where does that put us in the process of pursuing loans and grants for these projects?
You bet. That's another excellent question, Councilmember Payton. So I actually asked the city clerk to help me with this project because it's pretty time intensive, but currently we don't meet the certification requirements for operating a water treatment plant because you have to have staff that are at the same level of certification as your water treatment plant to be seen by the state and EPA as being in compliance. So we have a level 2 water treatment plant. We have staff that don't even have level 1 certification. And based on how many hours Jordan currently puts into the plant, he will become level 1 certified. I believe it was July of 2024. So we will continue to be out of compliance until then. And that makes us significant amount of points for best practices for. So I reached out to the state and have been working with the water and sewer superintendent over in Homer to see if on his off day, he would be willing to be the city's remote operator because he has the certifications needed so that our plant could be in compliance. And that requires a lot of time. So I asked the city clerk to complete that data compilation called AMOS so that we can hopefully get a remote operator to be in compliance, to meet the threshold for points for a best practices score, which will then make us eligible for loans like the state revolving loan fund, which are up to 75% loan forgiveness. It's a long-winded way to say we're working on it, but it's still a lot of time and steps necessary to do that work.
Thank you, Rachel. Harmony, did you get your answer that you were looking for there?
Yeah, I did. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, then we want to take and see if anyone from the public, I can't see on my screen, but see Heidi, is anyone from the public on that wishes to comment on any of these topics tonight?
I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. All right, so we'll bring it back to the council here. Let's see. What I'm assuming we're going to have a few more of these work sessions as well, just like we have in all the previous years, bringing us all the most current relevant information prior to going most of this to have fresh in our minds as we go into the budget cycle. You need any more, you need anything out of this meeting, Rachel, for tonight, or is this primarily just for information for everyone to start thinking about these items coming up?
Thank you, Mayor. No, just so that council can see what I'm seeing. And so that way, as we're gearing up for the FY23 budget discussions, council will have more context as to why I'm presenting the options I'm presenting when looking at the FY23 budget.
Okay, perfect. All right, last chance. Any final comments for subject matter this evening? Okay, looks like we got about 40 minutes before our next meeting. So we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting a few minutes early, and then we'll see everybody back here in about 40 minutes for the special meeting on the Jackalope Bay Dock public comment period tonight. So, all right, we'll go ahead and stand adjourned and see everybody back shortly. Thank you.